Good afternoon, Dr. Harris.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. How about yourself, sir?
Pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Getting geared up for class. We got about 5 minutes till we get started. What's going on in the world?
Do what?
Hey, what's going on in the world?
Not a whole lot really. Uh, I've been doing a lot of trout fishing recently to no avail.
Nice. That's a good way. A good way to have time. It's quiet. It's I don't get to do quiet things very often. Actually, we almost didn't have class today. So this week I've got family's doing a whole bunch of trips to Tulsa because a lot of doctor's appointments and such. And I got a call probably about 30 minutes ago that my wife just said, "We have a flat tire and where's the spare?" And it's like, so, but they were able to resolve that, so I didn't have to get involved in that one. Paper and then theory side, we talk about social disorganization. Talked about social control. And then let's see, what else do they bring in here? They bring in some of the delinquency stuff, cultural. Take a look here. An enemy, strain.
I've heard from some other criminology professors that anime is really interesting to apply to certain crimes like sexual offenses, especially because it's somewhat difficult to apply the theory in those instances.
Oh yeah, and that's the other thing is so each of these theories has and it's like in this chapter there's a lot of the social side of stuff in this specific one, but they'll have whether it's specific crime type, specific level of analysis. They'll have see where else they're going before. I mean, just focusing on this aspect and this aspect alone, what you'll find is that the relationship between, your theory, your interests, what level you want to analyze it, and all the other factors that they all build off of each other very specifically. There's some room for some play. Here, let me let this person in. Got a fan to move it farther away. But sound. But it's one of those things that when you look at that has some of them. Right, so you start out with your theory, maybe you start out with like your topic of interest, that kind of thing. And then what you do from there is sort of like what we were doing last time. First thing you should do is go look at the literature, because as you're doing that, you'll see, okay, for this interest here, maybe they'll study it as a specific type of crime or specific aspect of it. As you're reading what's out there, they'll identify the type of theory that they use, which indicates that those theories apply there. And they'll identify their level of analysis. So that'll also identify, what theory they're using at what level of analysis, because some of those things, they have very, very, very specific applications. Right now, it's just to get you guys to where you know what the theories are and you can play with them some. And so that's what we're going to do. We start talking about this. Kind of give you an idea for, amen. Yes, good. To kind of give you an idea for like a content class that I'm teaching right now that's academic. They've got crime prevention. And so like in crime prevention, you're dealing with this. Like they'll have specific theories that they use, specific crime types that we focus in on. And then you have the level of analysis in terms of, we talk about individuals, we talk about groups, we talking about, when we actually look at it, we talk about counties, what exactly is it we're talking about? But you'll also have this whole other aspect of it that's going to tie into this in terms of overlap, in terms of, when we start talking about crime type, to some degree, that's going to be, you know, the deviance pattern that's associated. You know, let this person in. Bailey. So it's like for crime prevention stuff, it's like how, you know, what aspect of crime prevention are you looking at? Are you looking at you know, that initial they call that primary prevention where you're actually stopping crime? Are you talking about secondary, where it's about maybe stopping particular persons from recommitting crime? Maybe it's tertiary, where it's actually not really about tertiary. It's not really about the crime itself, but about the fact that you're creating a better environment, and as a result, it takes care of those other two. And so those are different ways you can look at it. In here, it'd be like when we start talking about learning theories, which we talked about some already. Whenever I talked about our learning theories versus psych learning theories, you see different things, and so they get used in different ways. Like here, the different types of learning theories that we have, one of them is the old one is differential association. That's the earliest one from Sutherland. Basically, what it was is the more people you know, the more likely you are to define and learn the way that their acceptable behaviors kind of thing, that you define your actions by those around you. That's how that you learn. Right. And so that's a great way to explain that, you know, secondary deviance, where you have someone else who's breaking the law. But that first person who broke the law, that theory doesn't really explain that because it started somewhere. This only explains how someone else learned it. Right. So there's some logic to it, and some of you just kind of have to learn it as you go. And that's the whole point of the paper is it's the experience of it, because you'll be playing with these ideas. So we'll spend some time working on papers, and we'll spend some time going through the remaining theories, aspects in this chapter we've yet to cover. With the paper, what you do is you're looking at that and you're making those connections. And I started talking about that a little bit last time. In terms
Some
of
of these theories are going to be easier to frame certain ideas around naturally, right?
Yeah.
Like to me, rational choice theory would probably be the easiest to apply to any topic because you're really
Mhm.
just looking at choices that anyone
Yeah.
can make. You don't have to rely on any
Mhm.
assumptions, really, just that a person is capable of making free will decisions.
Exactly. And then so where you come into that is they'll focus on very, very specific crime types, because like your crimes of passion, there's not much choice there. The people really aren't thinking, right? Or another one would be that same secondary, primary kind of thing, where it's what do I want to type? There's a few different directions you can take. For that one specifically, rational choice. Usually, one of the things you find right away is this that they focus in on specific types, and then in terms of how they're studying, how they go about it, it's like we did dealing with primary, secondary, tertiary. It's like it's all going to be relative. And here, the theories they tend to focus in on. So, like if you're dealing specific crime prevention, you know, they'll have primary, secondary, tertiary levels, kind of thing, as in stages of criminal development. And here, what they talk about are the different types of theories. So some apply certain frames better than others, and that's where you look what they're probably talking about. It's that like criminality, right? To some degree, you're dealing with people. To some degree, you're dealing with crime. That's going to be an event. And to some degree, you're dealing with like those earlier ones where they're talking about ecology and that kind of stuff. You're dealing with environment, which you're really talking about. Sometimes it's location and time. Right. And so the environment and the event type stuff goes over really, really well together. So it's like you'll see your routine activities theory, your rational choice theories, and all those will come in for the event kind of stuff. Well, yeah. And then the environment stuff will feed into how those opportunities feed. That's how that works to some degree. Cool.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's one of those things it's why I love academia, but it's also one of the things that drives people crazy, because at any one point in time, you handle this like you do real life. We're all operating at multiple levels all at once, and so we got to figure out that one that we want to focus in on. And so the easiest way to do that is start with the topic and do it naturally, or start with the theory and do it naturally. You look at that theory, it'll generate all the research that's related to it as best it can, and look to see what types of topics come up the most. And that'll start to direct you there. And if you're interested in topics, you start with topics, right? I look at these topics, and as I'm looking at it, okay, what kinds of theories are popping up? Because that'll be your framework. Cool. All right, so far in this class, we'll talk theory for a little bit, and then we'll jump back into paper stuff. So last time we were talking about strain and anomie, I believe. I'll share this. Here we go. Share screen. Here we go. So let me move this around so I can pick it from the other side. Behind the screen. Okay. So we've already talked about social disorganization, and to some degree, it's on a continuum of social control, but that's kind of an understood thing. We'll talk about it more specifically here in a minute, I think. Anomie arrives with Durkheim. We've talked about that. It's that, unattachment, that kind of negative state and things. A lot more to it. In our field, it develops over into strain. And so strain theory, what you start talking about is strain itself is a negative affective state. Basically, it's an emotional state that people do not like. Right? So you have that negative affect. How you get that is through, actually, this might actually have a flowchart on it. It looks much prettier in my handwriting, if I remember correctly. It does. Good. I'll show you that. We'll scroll down to that in a second. So we've already talked about, in terms of anomie, you have these options here: conformity, innovation, ritualism, retreatism, rebellion. So that's the byproduct of the means and the goals. I drew that last time. So it's like, do you have the means? Yes, no. Are you able to get the goals? Yes, no. If yes and yes, you have both the means and able to acquire the goals, that's conformity, right? If you don't have the means, but you're able to acquire the goals, that's innovation. That can be crime, right? If you have the means, but you don't get the goals, that's ritualism. You're just doing it because that's kind of what society's trying to do. And then retreatism and rebellion, both of those fall under you don't have the means and you don't accept the goals. So rebellion's more negative in terms of you're moving against it. Retreatism is more of that neutral, as in you're removing yourself, avoidance kind of thing. Move back. From there, strain will come in and say what we do, what it does. Okay. So you have that goal and the means process. Here it starts talking about relative deprivation theory. There's actually a whole lot more on that when it comes to strain. So the book will talk about, ideally, our goal for our society is that middle class status, the middle class measuring rod. The book calls it, it's actually quite freaking called the middle class measuring rod. That those, that's kind of like the ideal place that anyone wants to be. But especially if you're on the lower end, because that's the idea. They want that middle class life. If they're not able to get it, it creates that negative affective state, that's strain. And then crime is the result of how they try to address that strain. Relative deprivation, you'll see it comes across in a number of areas, all of them tied to this kind of social vein. Basically, what we start talking about is deprivation and disadvantaged. So you have relative and concentrated kind of things, and absolutes. So absolute deprivation, absolute poverty kind of things. That's real, as in objective, as in that's one way of looking at it. The relative side is the other way of looking at it, as in, this may not be absolute poverty, but relative to those in your immediate sphere, you have less than everyone else, and that itself generates strength. That would be like you live in that upper middle class neighborhood and your house looks lower middle class, right? You're not absolutely in any type of deprivation. You're not really, missing out, but that relative nature of what you have versus everyone else comes back in. And so depending on how you want to look at it, what you want to look at, sometimes you make that choice between absolute and relative. Relative is more frequent because, well, we have a lot more to do with things that are relative than absolutes in this field. This is all social. That social element is really what you want to tie into. The absolute's a definite important part of it, but there are some big things you miss if you only look at the absolute. All right, next slide. Oh, here's where I start talking about general strain theory and the negative affective states. Yeah, sources of strain, failure to achieve the goals. You don't have the achievements and your expectations. Take away positive things, you involve negative stimuli. So very straightforward. Consequences, coping, those are all prime. The next slide will give you an outline for it. And so it says sources of strain, your negative affective states, that's basically negative emotions, strain, and then the behavior you get. Next slide will outline those a little bit. So you got anomie, institutional anomie, relative deprivation, and general strain theory. Deviance. To back up one. So this is the next one. Gotten this one. Kind of address that one. If we want to go back into that one, we might. But this is the next one. Deviance. So everything related to deviance is stuff that's outside of norms, outside of what's seen as cultural norms. So you have everything that's associated with subcultures here too. And that's the interesting stuff because our society is one that has how many cultures in it? I'm going to call on you since you're actually here. How many cultures are in our society? It won't give you a number. There's too many to say. Yeah. And so it's like there's a lot there. So when we start talking about cultures and that kind of stuff, there's some ideology involved a little bit. And so it's kind of important to note that to begin with and keep that in mind as you deal with those topics, because when you start dealing with culture, there's a few things that come to mind. And I'm trying to remember how I want to present it. Because you deal with a couple of things. One's going to be in here because I saw it. Okay. It was in the textbook. That would be good if it's in the textbook and not in the slides. Okay. Quick talk on that one. Assimilation, appropriation, and change. So this one, here they start talking about lower socioeconomic status classes create an independent subculture with some sets of rules and values, and they clash with conventional values. What they're talking about there is that if you lack the means and the goals, and you have a large group of people that lack those means and goals, and you have disorganization, what you may end up with is what arises out of that is its own distinct subculture. And if you were to go in there and ask people, identify your list of priorities, values, things that are of importance to you in a particular order that will conflict with what items people would put on that list and their order if you're looking at general society. So there's a conflict there. From the outset, we start running into ideologies and perspectives. Watch it for these two words right here. You're dealing with people in normal society, and I'll kind of relate it to some textbook stuff in a second. Assimilation, appropriation, and change, right? So basically what you're talking about is cultural change is a general thing you're talking about, whether it's subcultures being created, the difference between one culture and another, or maybe it's the conflict between the two because they don't necessarily align, right? Now, whether you're dealing back into those theories related to be like start getting closer to Marx, where it's more about the class power struggle, group struggle, that kind of thing. And so here what you'll see in common language, we used to use this word, assimilation. Now we use appropriation. What is appropriation?
Taking from one culture, adding it to yours.
Yeah, so that cultural appropriation. I can't remember if this book used that
It's
term.
kind of the opposite of,
Is it though, or is it just the best ideas move forward?
well, that's true.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this whole process should be. Best ideas go
But-
farther.
But when you assimilate, you don't always take your best ideas.
Yeah.
Assimilate.
Yeah, so you got the direction, right?
Right.
One culture from another culture, maybe size. But really what you also have is there's an element of, this has an element of steal to it. Taking, right? This one, you're becoming one. Right? And so this one has a little bit more of a negative thing to it. If you look at it from a historical perspective, you start getting into some of the cultural stuff. Basically, anytime you're dealing with change, where it comes for us in this field, it's the cost of internet connection. Where it comes up in art is, if you have that cultural issue, and it ends up being something on the legal side, who's gonna force somebody to change? That's gonna be your police officers. They act as agents of change. They are to some degree, the embodiment of your dominant culture to some degree. So that's gonna be a part of it. This from the outset is kind of interesting because as I start talking about some of the other aspects in this textbook, you can see the stuff will come back in. I know what it was. I'd seen something about masculinity. I was ahead in a different section that talked about that toxic masculinity or something like that in one of my textbooks. Like, be careful with this, because what that is that's to some degree ideology creeping in, to some degree real relationships there. Like you start talking about the that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's real relationships there, but be careful with how you classify it. That'll come up again, and probably the reason why the what you're talking about theory was bringing that up is because these things are so connected. So as you're learning one thing, you start picking up on other hints of it. And one of that's that underlying thing of the methodology, which we're not there yet. We haven't taken that class, or if you have taken it, we're not developing it here. How that methodology aligns with the theory and how you can actually test the things that you're interested in. Because if you don't align them right, it won't work. And that's where things get complicated. All right. So next one is, we'll talk about that. There we go. Okay, so we hit this point. The next point was subcultural norms often clash with conventional values. Folk concerns, cultural transmission, gang culture, things they talk about here. So when you start dealing with cultures, subcultures, and that kind of stuff, particularly most of the stuff's going to be in gangs because it is something where you have a very, very tight culture. So we find most of it. I want to say to start out with Merton, I can't remember. But that's where they start identifying the deviant side of it, the cultural side of it. Basically, what you see is I know they'll eventually key into this person. You need to be aware of a guy by the name of Solomon Coburn and a guy by the name of Elijah Anderson. In these areas, they're the most common. This guy is the most common. If you ever heard a Code of the Streets, that would be one example of research that's been done in this area. And basically what that person did is they went into an area and started identifying, well, how that culture works. One of the most interesting things about it is, like, if you look at their folk concerns and how that works, well, there's a few things popping up there. Street smart, street cred, that kind of thing. One's esteem on the street and their value, how people determine their own individual value is one of the things that they tend to focus in on. And as you're doing that, that relative nature in involving other people, violence is one of those ways that people do that. Don't mess with this person. They're a hard person. They know how to take care of themselves. They are self-sufficient. these are all very positive aspects of people, very positive aspects of culture, but in this specific environment, they are given a particular bend that takes them into a criminal direction. And it's like, in terms of the research that's there, why? It'll key into a number of different areas, but I want to say the book talked about scripts a little bit, about the flow, about how, people interact in areas of that nature. They literally call it scripts to some degree, depending on how you study it, what you're studying. That would be like, if someone comes in and you have an interaction with them, how did you greet them? What was your body language? Do you come out feeling like that person has tarnished your name and your interactions or affected your image in some way? And then what's the proper response to that? Is it something where it escalates? Is it something? And so in all of that, that's where you start to get an idea for how that culture actually works. And yeah, so it talks about cultural transmission and gang cultures. Okay. That's what they started with, Albert Cohen. And here's what I talk about the middle class measuring rods here. Formation of deviant subcultures, the reaction formation is maybe in reaction to the fact that you're having cultural issues. But there's more than that. Okay, the respect game. Youth communicates an image of not being afraid to die, not being afraid to kill, is giving himself a sense of power on the street. So they're talking about codes of the street kind of thing. All right, how you interact. A very, very quick way to amp up the amount of criminal activity in the area, or if it's an area that's on an edge where it's like, this is where one culture is and another culture is, and you have actual conflict, that can actually cause its own sets of crimes because people don't understand cultures. And so you start getting aggressive, I take care of it immediately kind of thing. Okay. Differential opportunity. Again, you're back in the opportunity structures. First, term for first. I'm actually drawing a blank at the current time because I'm thinking about paper stuff. Anyway, we'll just click forward, see if it's anything more than just some classifying gangs. No, that's Cloward Nolan. That's right. Hershey's bonds. That's control. So what do I want to tell you about this? Here's where they outline Miller, Cohen, and Cloward and Olin. That should be capitalized. Oh, concern. Major promise. Citizens obey the street rules of lower class life. But because of that, since they're dealing with what they actually have to deal with on the daily, they are commonly in conflict with the law. Cohen's theory. Lower class frustrations, failure to achieve, you join a gang, because that's the opportunity that's there. There are a lot of typos in this. Cloward and Olin's, your conventional opportunities, that's that same thing that we were talking about before when we were talking about means and goals. Yeah, you join a gang, and it specifically typifies based on the structures available there. And if you read much on gangs, it's like that. It'd be like if I told you about actual drug trafficking in gangs, how many gangs actually do it to make money, and who actually makes the money? It's like no one makes any money but those at the very, very top. Everyone else is penny pinching the entire way through, and they don't really do it to make money, particularly if you're on the street, because that's not what you're doing. It'll be the ones that are at the top, because the ones at the top, they'll actually understand accounting and business, because guess what? They decided they want to have the money.
So
yeah,
a lot of that, it looks like some of it is caused by the individual as far as not achieving, and some of it is caused by
yes, it's hard to untether
the system, so to speak.
And that's it. It's really hard to untether those things. We don't really so much. We assume that it applies to the individual level if we're testing a group one. And so what we do is we test at the group level to see at the group. Yeah, this is what's happening. In these areas, you can see, socioeconomic status isn't there. Maybe the education level isn't where it should be for the rest of the city. Also, at the same time, your crime rates are high. And at the same time, you start looking at, if you're dealing with conventional opportunities, Maybe if you want to study like, there's all kinds of different ways you look at that in terms of actual opportunities. You look at employment, you look at, there's all kinds of stuff. You just have to look to see what kinds of areas that they're delving into currently. I don't do that one, so I don't know that one before off the top of my head. But it's that same process. So yes, it applies to the individual. We're dealing with groups, and it's really hard to separate out the two.
There's a lot of stuff here.
Yeah.
It makes your head spin.
Oh, yeah.
Just looking at it.
Oh, yeah, and the overlaps are where it gets really hard because you have to have the nuance to pull out. Okay, this is actually social control. This is actually social disorganization. Are you dealing with enemy or strain? It's really, you're dealing with both kind of thing. And so play with the ideas is the big thing. Okay, social structure and public policy. So here's where we start getting into a number of issues where they try to balance out those scales between different groups. Public assistance, welfare, improving community structures in their cities, programs that address poverty or root causes for poverty, and things that reinforce the community. Wide variety of things, wide ways to try to help. There's a few different conversations we had with that in terms of when you're dealing with people and their perspectives and that kind of stuff and how you approach those topics. And basically what you start getting into is this more of the applied side where you actually start to make those changes and see if they make a difference. Yeah, that worked right. Okay, and that should get us through this chapter on social theories. Blink. Yeah, social structure theories. Next one's social processes. So we won't delve into that one just yet. What we'll do is we'll take some time and deal with papers and see how that goes. So last time we got through one, I spent a lot of time talking about, here it is, stop share. There we go. So I spent a lot of time last class, talking about the general idea of what triangulation is and how to use it in terms of you personally, as you're working on these papers, daily life, that kind of thing. I don't want to talk too much more about that process, but actually just work through it with you guys. So we'll deal with that in terms of papers. Let's see. I think I still have a lot of stuff with me. Thus far, I think I've only gotten topics from you guys. Is that correct? Yeah, that's all I've asked for. Yeah.
I sent you my.
Yeah. Cool.
You must not ever posted that one.
Not yet, because I wanted to get through where we
I
had time.
emailed it to you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we start moving into the actual written stuff, I wanted to take time to kind of show you guys this process for each of you individuals. That way you'll have a good idea at least where to start, where to find at least one article to get you going. And once that gets you going, you identify the theory you want to use. I'll start sending you some of the classics related to that, and we'll start pulling in some new stuff. So the big thing, triangulation. You have both or one or the other in terms of theory and topic. So between these two, you can see what exists. From there, theory in general takes a few different routes. And so I've probably talked about that already, but we'll dial down to it again so it makes it a little clearer. So you'll have your theory. On one side, you'll have replication, revision, reformulation. That's a process for theory development. You take what exists and you replicate it, to confirm that a rule applies, right? You start getting different results. Maybe you need to revise that theory a little bit, right? As you keep exploring, as more people keep exploring, maybe we need to reformulate it, right? We're going to take the basic concepts for how we think things work and we're going to change them around a little bit. That's why you get social disorganization, social control. It's like they're so close, but yet so different. You end up with a lot of theories like that because it's very, very nuanced in what actually functionally makes them different. right? And that's the hard part that you guys, you only get this information by seeing what exists out there at large. And that's the hard part.
So you're basically taking your topic
Mhm.
and you're trying to apply it to the theory, but sometimes it won't fit the theory that you're
Well,
thinking.
it's more like,
So you- You may be hit and miss, like.
yeah, it's gonna be hit and miss, yeah, and it's gonna be all over the place in terms of, what you'll find is that, you'll have a topic, it'll identify a few theories, or you'll have a theory and it'll identify a few topics, so you got some choices there. What you wanna do is you wanna find one that, well, see what's out there, see how much a theory is used, because that means it's easier to use that theory with the topic. And then see what they did, because once you see what they actually did, you'll start to get some of this going, where you see, okay, they're following these same concepts, but maybe with small changes. And so when you see all of that body, what you'll do, as much as you can get, is compile that down, and what you'll find is things do, well, positive, neutral, negative. I talked about that last time. 3 directions things go. Strong, consistent findings. Right? Each article will align with the theory or whatever. No, this conflicts with those findings, right? Most everything else will have mixed results, right? We don't really know, we need to study it farther. So you got to combine all those things now. At the same time, you're starting with this at the beginning of the process and the end, right? You're seeing what already exists, what it started with, right? And then you're trying to figure out what needs to exist, and that's right there in the middle again, right? It's the same process. You start at the top, you start at the bottom, and you work out the middle. Start at things that are consistent with things that conflict, and then you try to find out where that balance is, right? You have to do that across your theory, across your topic to some degree, and then underneath the theory are all the concepts and propositions. And so what you need to do is, in your paper, your introduction will give you an overview of the topic and your problem statement. Just identifying that this is why it is a problem, right? We'll spend a few pages on this if you really, really write it out. For here, it's like, we'll spend a couple pages on it. Most of your time is going to be spent in right here at your lit. Review. Right? That's this. When you sort this out, after you've identified all of your sources, you'll section it by concept. Right? You'll start with your topic. Then you'll go to topic. Then you'll go into the other topics that explain your topic. So, what is it about social disorganization in terms of its topics, in terms of the concepts and the topic that you have to explain it? So it's like, for the topic we have, it's whatever crime you have. Right? We're going to talk about it and how we define it. As we look at that, we're going to see that this theory that we're using will use, maybe it's population change, residential stability, economy, those types of things. Those are going to be your explanatory variables, right? After that, you'll move into control variables. These are things that we include for, because it will always have to include. It's like, if you have it, age, sex, race, those types of things, because those will always have some relationship to the variables that we use to explain what we're doing, and will have some relationship to our topic. Right? If I said crime, it's like, yeah, it's disproportionately spread across the different racial groups. That's something we need to keep in mind if we're trying to understand how it actually works. And so by the time you get to your control variables, basically here, you'll then outline what you told us. Right? Your introduction, your topic, your problem statement. It'll also state, okay, In the following section, we'll review whatever concepts are gonna be in this section, right? And it'll sort out like that. You tell them here what it is, problem statement, what's gonna be coming up. And here, you've already started to talk about your theory. You'll start with theory again. Identify your concepts. Identify the things that explain it. Identify your control variables. And then outline what you said, and you're done. So it was one that really will move very fast. And in here, what we can design is, we can design it as you were designing it the best way you wanted to design it, or if you want to design it where it's real easy. I can show you both ways. And that's going to be one of the things that we'll have to have conversations in class as those are developing for directions, because the methodology side, there's an easy way and there's hard way for everything. Right? And so I'll start showing you easy ways to get some of this stuff done.
So I'm kind of thinking in the topic, it's better to go broad than too narrow, right?
Well, you'll start out broad to begin with, because too narrow, you'll end up with like.
I think I started too narrow.
Yeah, you can start out too broad too. The hard part though is I start out with theory and topic, like general, like specific word, not like a question yet.
And
Because that's gonna be one that develops in the research method side. And some of the ones that you brought up are they're good, but they're extremely hard to do because of how you would go about testing on methodology side.
it's too new.
And that's the other thing. And
It's too current.
Yeah.
There's no research on
yeah, and that's not uncommon either.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out if that's something that really interests you. Let's sit down and talk about, okay, here's what exists and here's what we can try to pull in to get at what you're trying to get at.
Can you go into different research on that certain, like, what I'm thinking is theory is something to do with social. What is that? What is that? I wrote it down.
Print it off.
Well, it's the
That's the old one.
institution of socialization, but it's like social control or social, not learning.
Let me see if I got
It's where you take and you take all the institutions and you put it together. Because you look through these articles on this kid, his parents dropped the ball on them, they did all the wrong things parenting wise, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's all the family socialization and all that stuff. I never put that in there yet, but
Yeah, I hadn't looked at this one. I remember seeing it in there.
it's just, it's about the Oxford, when it's not, I just put it Columbine.
Mhm.
Putting kind of a broad topic about since then, this is the only one where the parents are actually being charged for manslaughter with this kid. And this is really
Mhm.
current.
Yeah, so that one would be really, really hard because it is that new.
That-
to be defined
The
in that
more I
area.
think about that might have been a bad look back.
Yeah, that one, we're gonna go back to that initial list that you had, and look at that one again, because that was a
Yeah.
little bit more open, and so that's part of it, is just, you start with the ideas, you play with them, and from there, we see where it goes. Like you had school shootings as a possibility, sentencing disparities, marijuana legalization. You want to think about school shootings, what I would do is I would actually study fear of crime at schools, because that's the biggest effect that it has, is on fear. It's not that it's super common. And it would kind of get you off into this realm, because you can start tying in, not just is it the children in the schools and their parents, and the parents worrying about their danger, it's also the liabilities of,
Yeah,
I'm gonna be held responsible for this person you're taking outside of my house, and then you start dealing with that, then you move in that direction and figure out how.
that was the angle I was looking at, because that's never been done before. They've never
Yeah.
charged a parent. They gotta, it's almost like social control is trying to tell the parents you have to control your kid.
Yeah, it's what it is with there is people who are in charge of the system are actively trying to take control over people, because they think if you control them, you get less crime. It's like, that's not how it works.
Yeah, it's not how it works. And it's too new. It's never, they don't have any, there's no research on it.
Yeah. Excellent. Everybody's at Sam's Club and as I was getting ready for class 1 calls, I got a flat tire and I'm stuck in Tulsa. Oh, they're getting that fixed. Yay. So
I
yeah,
don't know, is it possible to change that around somehow, to
the
broaden that out?
start with school shootings, focus on educational environments and fear. So what you should do is go fear, school, and then shootings. Start with those three topics and see what it generates. Because you're gonna be, you'll lock them. There's a whole lot of choice there. And the fear is where you really open up the topic, because there's been a lot more study on fear.
Yeah.
Because it's like the shooting themselves, it's like, yeah, and then their effects. But really the big one that goes by is fear. Because that's the one where if something happens here today, in 10 years, are people still talking about it? Maybe, right? And so it's like, that's the kind of effect those things have.
Well, yeah, the angle in that one too is
We were to do
you
that.
gotta have parents fearing repercussions of
And then are they
Not-
attached?
not controlling their children. I don't know how to put that exactly.
Well, and as you think through it, it's
Not
like,
being responsible.
yeah, and so that's the other side is it something where they actually adhere to the culture? So then you can bring in the other sides of the theories, right? And so it's one that you literally, as you go, you can build this out, and I'll show you guys something. All right, so I was gonna go to, we'll just say scholar, and I'll show you. If I said fear, we'll say school shootings. Is there anything else I need to say there? Fear, school, and shootings. Okay, we're gonna say review.
I just think that what
No, they're all
amazes-
just review articles
What
here.
amazes me about school shootings is it just all of a sudden happened around 1990. I mean, really, it's become an epidemic since 1999. Since Columbine. And that amazes me.
Let's do this, because that did not pull up very good results. Yeah, well, it's one of those things that if you really dig back into it, shootings like that instill fear aren't all that new. The schools are more of it because they really locked down the schools.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think they ought to do a lot more in schools than they do what they do, but that's.
it's a mixed bag. It really
that's all-
is.
Is that a methodology thing where you research about?
It can be like if you start really wanting to assess the schools, that's a whole line of research kind of thing. Let's see, we're gonna say fear. So fear of crime, because that's a broader term than just, they'll key more into this fear. Say school shootings, just put it like that. There you go. That's better, right? Because here you can click peer reviewed, and that first one's gonna stay right there. Right, and then you get the full PDF if you go into that. Right, and so if you start with just one good one, read through it, and then what you'll see is like this one. It gives you how adult populations express fear of mass violence and so this is outside of the US. But as you read it, what you'll end up doing is scroll all the way down.
I'd say that's kind of a universal thing, though. Fear is pretty universal.
Oh yeah, fear is definitely universal, and in terms of other environments, it's like they've created something really create fear. You're old enough, you probably remember, I think it was about 10 years ago, that was over in, I can't remember if it was Norway, Sweden, over in that area. Maybe Scandinavia, they had the island where it was an island that was filled with school children on a field trip. Someone snuck over to the island with was it a rifle or handgun or something like that, and just started picking them off. And because they don't have any guns whatsoever, they're not used to it. They're not used to violence. The response time was so bad that the person had hours kind of thing to go and slowly execute people one by one. It's like, yeah, that's the worst environment whatsoever, right? You know, they're coming for you.
I got a feeling that guy's out of prison by now. Or did he live?
I
He did, didn't he?
I have no idea.
I can't believe some of their punishments for crime.
Yeah.
It's like, in the jail, I saw a show, watched on the jails over there, they're like hotels or apartments, they're not really, not what you think of as jails.
So here's where you'd want to look for this one. In terms of their resources, I can identify a few good ones right there. Agnew is a name you've seen before. Farrell and Gray. Yep, those are big names in this one too. So you'll see a lot of stuff from Farrell, some from Gray. Ferraro. Let's see, it was Ferraro. LaGrange is another one if they're in here. Surprised they're not. Garland, Groves is another big name.
So that's basically when you get into your theory, then you're using all these things to confirm.
Yes.
What you're looking.
Yes. And that's exactly what it is because anything that we say, if we don't have someone else who's saying it to back us up,
Right.
it has no weight.
It's almost like you're in a court of law and you have to have evidence.
It is exactly like that. That's why when we were in procedures, I'm telling you, was it last class, the same thing. It's like seductive reasoning. You use these points and you bring it in this, it's the same thing. It
Yeah.
literally is.
Yeah. That's what it seems like. You just find an evidence.
Yeah, and that's
to
it.
back up your theory.
And that's it, exactly. Out of these right here, this is the person you need to start with. Hale, 1996. If you can't find it, let me know. Got it. What they do, I want to say it's cheap, I can't remember. They go through and outline the previous 60, that's probably about, so it's 90s, so it goes back to the 1960s. So only about 40 years. And they outline all the issues associated with sphere in general. And so that's a great resource.
I see where you're going with that.
And then, so Jackson's another big name. You'll see a lot of their stuff in fear. War. War is a huge name. So anything from War, you probably should read, even though. Yep, those are all journals. So that's good. You should be able to get those. He's got a lot of books. Books are what people most
Yeah,
find.
there's a lot of stuff there.
And so that's kind of stuff you'd want to look at.
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I see it now. I was having a hard time. The light bulb hadn't quite gone on.
Yeah, and so it's literally what that is. That's the role of citations, is providing you your evidence to show, one, you've read it, two, that you understand it, and three, that this is actually going to function. And to some degree, I'll come in and scaffold and make sure it all functions. And to kind of give you an idea for like generalized frameworks for understanding things, there's many, many different ways to do it. There's the natural way, there's the, I'm going to develop a project from the theory itself or on this topic and let it naturally develop. That's how you always do a lit review. When it comes to the methodology side, there's a few ways to help speed you up, but this would be more like a preview for if you're taking methods in the next couple of years. Some of the stuff that we've got going in terms of, actually, I don't have that in there just yet. I won't show you guys that. Databases, that's on my actual computer. I need to upload it into Sure Drive. Of course, I've taken
You pulled
the,
that off of Google Scholar, right?
that one I got from the library website.
Oh, from our library.
Yeah, so this one I can actually, do this for you right here, and then we move on to the next one. Download. We'll say, fear, school, shoot. Bink, bink, bink. We'll
Hey,
say,
you send it to me.
yeah, downloads, fear, school, shoot, send, boom.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, all right, and so that's done. This thing's all over the place. And so that will give you one. You can start triangulating from there.
Give you some stuff to look.
You can see how they did it, themselves in this one. The methodology stuff, I wouldn't really be so worried about. Where you need to focus in when you read these things for lit reviews. So here they'll give you an abstract that's highlights.
Yeah.
The introduction, and sometimes the introduction will be a few pages. If that's the case, that is their lit review. And that what they'll do is they'll go through and focus more specific. Like, see, what they did here is introduction. This is them setting the stage for that problem statement, right? The next section, they focused in on assumptions. So that's going to be how it actually works, or what's assumed. They're propositions, in other words. Your demographics, your control variables. All right, and so they outline each of those in each paragraph, kind of thing. Here's age and gender. Here's worry for family members. And then when you get down here, so experiences, that kind of stuff. This study, where it picks up with the study and that's methodology. At that point in time, you don't really need to
study.
Yep. Yeah, and so once you see where it starts outlining research questions or methodology, you guys can ignore that for now, and then skip all the way down to was it results? Sometimes they'll say results and conclusions, that kind of thing. Because what it'll do is it will tell you, okay, we discover that women express more intense fear of mass violence than men, right? They'll give you the numbers, but really what you need to know is, okay, women express it more. If you want to add in the numbers right now, you can. That doesn't really matter. Right now, it's just understanding how it works. And then from there, they'll provide all this stuff. You don't really care about that right now. That's methods.
Is that methodology?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so this is output from the analyses that they've used. And so That's what all that is. And then here they'll start talking about it. When they start talking about multivariate, it will have methods mixed in, but you can still pull out the stuff you need. Like for example, model 1 takes into account socio-demographic factors, victimization, and depression. The final model, which is only their second model, also controls fear of mass violence, right? And so they talk about those differences. And so in seeing those differences for those two different analyses, what you'll see is, okay, did their new variables improve, and so they'll talk about the changes there. And so what you have to do is you have to take, okay, here's the general concepts that they outlined. Here's how they worked. That, if you read that, they might outline this theory specifically. Sometimes they don't. And sometimes they'll just have it in a couple of the citations, and if you know it, you know it, because they're speaking to us. And it'd be like talking in Latin. You know, it's like there's only one population you're talking to when you talk in Latin, the educated kind, right? And so you'll read those, the first part, and then results, maybe discussions where it's going to really make it have an impact. So they'll apply it there to some degree. That middle section's methods, we don't really care about that in here. We don't care about the type of analysis used, their specific results found just yet.
I wonder if you could go deeper into that and look, because what I'm looking at is parents' responsibility, and maybe put parent spheres in there.
Yeah.
And narrow it down a little bit more.
Yeah, that's what you should do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
So you get a base level for fear.
Because of that, because of those people getting arrested.
And that's exactly what you should do. You should follow it logically. So it's like, okay, this is fear in general, right? This is fear of mass shootings. Here are the different people it affects. So we're going to focus in on.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I'm getting an idea of what I'm gonna do.
Cool.
All right, well, thanks, Doc.
Yeah. So we'll pick up with the next one of you next time. Does that sound good?
Thank you, Dr. Hurst.
Yeah, my pleasure. And from there, next class, we'll pick up the next section, which is social processes, and we'll continue this. We might spend more time on this to get people moving a little bit faster, unless you guys want to schedule meetings with me. Do let me know, and we'll get that scheduled. The next few weeks is going to be busy because we're gearing up for several national presentations. So, yeah, good time to strike the iron while it's hot. So we'll pick up there next time. Have a great day, and
I've got a question for you, but it has anything to do with this class.
okay, so we'll cut this then, and I'll see you guys later, and then let's talk.
Has to do with their last class.
Okay, cool. All right.
Well,